Hi, D. Krause here. Sorry, I've been pretty busy lately doing what I'm supposed to do, which is finishing up the trilogy, finishing up some edits that my editor sent me, and, writing stuff. But I have managed to, get a few novels read in there, and I figured it was time to update the site. And so today we're going to talk about Dan Simmons' book, The Terror. Now, I've read only one other Dan Simmons novel. I know that he's got quite a few out there, and that was the novel Drood, which was his take on the rather bizarre Colin Wilkie, who some of you may know wrote The Moonstone and a few other strange books back there about the same time that Charles Dickens was writing. Now, Drood was a long novel that went on and on about Wilkie and his delusions and obsession with Dickens and his delusions and addiction to laudanum, which is heroin, and obsession with Dickens and his delusions, and I think you catch my drift. But I've long been a fan of the early to late Victorian period, and I put up with Simmons' obsessive sets of repetitive obsessions just to enjoy the atmosphere. So here we have another Simmons novel about set in the early to mid Victorian era, and it concerns the ill-fated Franklin expedition, which went out to find the mythical Northwest Passage. And, this is great. You have intrepid Victorian explorers standing heroically with one leg up on the frozen decks, gazing at endless frozen seas while shouting, "Mr. Christian!" Then the lowly peasant common sailors knuckle their foreheads and say, "Governor," and, what's not to like about this? Besides, AMC was about to release a miniseries and based on the novel, and I figured I'd beat him to the punch. So I read it. And it was a long novel about Francis Crozier's obsession with John Franklin and the ice pack and alcoholism and John Franklin and ice and booze and a monster. Typical Simmons so far, at least as far as I've seen, and fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, well. So essentially, this novel could have gone about half its 800 or so pages and still told a very effective story. Because really, there is only so much one can say about ice and desolation and drunkenness and despair and monsters before a point really needs to be reached. After all, this is a limited cast of characters in a limited situation, stuck in the ice, thousands of miles from home, supplies dwindling, and a monster stalking them. Even with a generous backstory and character examination that explains how we got in this mess to begin with, you can wrap all this up somewhere around page 450. But what you've got are sailors going out on the ice and get eaten by the monster, and go out on the ice and get eaten by the monster, and go up on deck and get eaten by the monster, and sit in their hammocks and get eaten by the monster, and then they massacre a bunch of Inuit, finally, something different. But then we're back on the ice getting eaten by the monster. Now, I guess what throws me is this blasé attitude toward this monster. I mean, it's a monster. Not some particularly crafty polar bear like I originally thought. It's an honest-to-God monster, and dudes, we're stuck in the ice, and there's a bloody monster out here stalking us. I mean, But no, it's treated like some deuced nuisance. Bother it all, let's go look for a break in the ice, shall we, mates? Maybe that's the difference between Victorian heroes and New Age sensitive guys, but I'd expect a little more concern here. Granted, there is an attempt to trap the monster that goes horribly wrong, but other than that, the monster becomes a mere hazard like the wind, Yes, something needs to be done about it, but something needs to be done about starvation and freezing to death too, so here we are. You're aware by page 400 that everyone is pretty much screwed. Monster or no. So why did we need another 400 pages for that inevitable screwing to manifest? Simmons likes to write, that's why. If you can just bear with it, you'll get to the unnecessarily distant end that you knew was coming long before you get to it, and the journey won't be bad. I mean, there's things like a very weird ice carnival in the middle of the book that smacks of a Fellini movie and is fascinating enough to distract your impatience to get on with it, man. There is a later treatise on Inuit mythology that sounds suspiciously like Inuit medicine men were making it up as they went along, but it's fun. Really, though, enough's enough. And this coming from a reader, moi, who thinks novels should be, by law, no less than 600 pages, or a trilogy of 600 pages each, like the Baroque cycle collection. But you need enough material to fill that 600 pages, not keep repeating the same events with different names until you fill your quota. And you should take your monsters a little more seriously. After all, freezing to death pales by comparison. I guess. D. Krause here. See y'all later.